Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of The Complete Advisor. I say this every time. I say that this is a special episode, but I have to say I'm very excited. This is going to be a super cool episode. I'll introduce you to our guest here in just one second, but imagine if you had the perspective of somebody who was managing some of the biggest acts that are out there in rock and roll fame, and you have to manage the stage production, you have to manage the artist, you have to manage every aspect of the tour. And then you think about the things that you as a financial advisor have to manage. Your marketing, you have to manage your office staff, you have to manage yourself. And then we go to the other side, you have to manage client expectations, you have to manage clients, you have to maintain those relationships, all while helping guide somebody to a successful retirement. So with that being said, I am very excited to introduce you to Mark Billis. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'll throw out your bona fides, and then you fact check me and back me off here now. So when we look at we would look at you. You're out of California. You have a successful practice. You've been practicing. I'm going to just do the math in my head, but about 30 years.
Not quite. 20. A little over 20.
Okay, little over 20.
So I started in 2002.
2002. Okay, so 2002. But prior to that, you were in a 100% completely different industry, or is it? But you were tour manager. You were in the music industry.
So yeah, I had a 20-year span in the music industry. I had several different positions, but mostly I was a tour manager and tour accountant you're an independent contractor. So I worked for, over my career, probably over 45 different Grammy-winning and award-winning singers, internationally acclaimed singers.
Nice. I'm going to get you to name drop later. But these were big acts, though, right?
They were all big acts. Mostly at least soft-seater, theaters or arenas, sometimes stadium acts.
Golly. So you were gone. That's kind of a summer thing back in the day, or is it a year-round?
It was pretty much year-round. So depending on the tour and what part of the world you were in, summer times were always big in the U.S., but then in the fall and the spring you do international dates. And being independent, the longer the tour, the better it was for me. So I would basically plan on leaving my home sometime in January and not coming home till September, October, somewhere around there.
That's crazy. How does one get into the music industry?
So it's tough. I actually was fortunate in that I realized early on my passion was music, but I know I can't sing and I know I can't play the guitar.
Dance?
No, can't dance either. But what I did was I took my passion and as a broke college student, I realized that I can't afford to go to shows anymore. So I went and got a job at the local concert hall and worked in my early years in college for the concert hall, got some experience, and then found out the university had an entertainment committee, joined the entertainment committee, and then I became the booker for the university. So I booked some not only concerts, but speaker series as well. And in doing so, I made some professional contacts dealing with agents and managers. And then when I graduated, one of the agents that I was working with came to me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a job." He said, "Well, George Thorogood is one of my acts, and he's going out on the road, and he needs some help with his merchandise sales. Would you be available to go out on tour with him?" And that was like a dream come true. I was a young single guy in my early 20s. And so I was a big fan, so I jumped at the chance.
That's one of the first CDs I bought. When I switched from cassette to CDs, that was George Thorogood and the Destroyers. That was a great CD.
Great band, nice guys, and a lot of fun to work with. And so that's how I got my start and did a good job for George. And as a result, when that tour ended, that same person came and said, "I know some people that work with Ted Nugent. He's going out on tour. And would you be available to do that?" So, in fact, my first time to Kansas City on tour, we came here, and Ted Nugent was playing with REO Speedwagon at the Arrowhead
Oh wow,
football
that's
stadium.
a big show.
So yeah, that was a pretty big show, and so it just kind of grew from there. It's all word of mouth. It's all who you know. and the reputation that you build. It's not something you can really send a resume out for. It's mostly just based on referrals and contacts.
Referrals and contacts and
Sound
networking.
familiar?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So how does one go from that industry to becoming a successful financial advisor?
So what happened with me after 20 years meeting my wife on the road and then getting married and having kids is we came to realize that I was leaving in January and not coming home till September, October. And I was missing a lot of events in our kids' lives. And that was important to me. I love the music. I love the artists, but it's really a short-term gig. And when you're with them, you're all family. But then after the tour is over, everybody scatters. So you don't really have the opportunity to build really long-term lasting relationships. So when I was trying to retire from being on the road and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my second act in life, I started to sit down and budget and forecast what it would take for me to feed my family and keep that things status quo and what I needed and where I wanted to go in the future. And I was a tour manager, but I was also a tour accountant. So I was really big on budgeting and profitability and working through those types of issues to make my artists profitable. Now I was working to find out how to make and figure out how to make me profitable. So I got fascinated with the process and I realized how difficult it was. And then it occurred to me that if I was having problems figuring this out, that probably other people were too. Back then, all the information wasn't as easily accessible as it is today. So it led me in the direction of financial services, and then I started interviewing with, wirehouses and insurance companies, and ultimately took a job with a retirement planning company, and it all started from there.
That's great. That is so interesting. So when you look at, and I've got all these questions about that, the parallels there. So in the old world, in your old world with the tours, risk management, you have all these different challenges that you have to plan for. How do you apply any of those strategies? Do you reach back into your tour management bag when you're working on kind of as a planner looking at the risks out there for your clients?
Well, I do, and it's really what I learned as a young person in the music industry. It was a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day job, and when I was a tour manager and tour accountant, I was usually the liaison between the public and the artist. So anybody that wanted to get to the artist had to go through me to set up whatever needed to be done. So it put me in a position of the phone was always ringing, there was very little sleep, and there were a lot of decisions that had to be made in advance, but also life happens and there were a lot of changes that needed to be made along the way. So it really taught me how to quickly analyze the situation and then make a decision and live with the results of that decision. And unknowingly, it really helps me as an advisor because it allows me to listen to my clients, what their goals are and how they envision achieving those goals, and then really taking the pieces, putting them together, and then coming up with a plan or a strategy to help them achieve those goals. So it's not as intense in that you're not dealing with pressure situations on a daily basis, but it's even more intense because these are people's lives and this is their money, and the decisions that you help them come to is going to have an impact, and you want that impact to be a positive experience, not a negative experience.
As you were just talking, I was just thinking through my head the amount of issues that you must have had to deal with on a day by day, because it's not just one. You've got, in a band, say there's 5 people in the band, and then you've got the crew. You must have had people coming to you with having to make decisions all day long.
Oh, all the time. So I was responsible and traveled with the band, and then there was a production manager that was responsible for and traveled with the crew. But ultimately, the production manager answered to me and came to me with all the issues
Oof.
of the day, and guest lists and interview schedules and security issues and all the issues, because every day you're in a different building in a different city. So each one is unique, and you really have to. It helped being in the business for a lot of years because of the buildings became repetitive. We knew who we were dealing with, and there were opportunities to have some consistency. But it was, fly by the seat of your pants a lot of times. And financial advising is certainly not flying by the seat of your pants, but what it certainly has helped me to do is look at the range of options that are out there and kind of narrow it down and to systematically funnel it down to maybe 2 or 3 of the best options and then make a decision from there.
Did you, so when you think back, because a lot of times we don't think this when we're thinking back to our younger selves, but that's a lot of stress. I cannot imagine there must have been times where it was just burning you up. How did you avoid burning out as a tour manager? And then do you apply, because our business is still stressful. Anything you apply from your old days or any tips or tricks?
Well, I've been gray since my 20s. So that was part of how I dealt with the stress. The other was just you learn to compartmentalize. So, during the day, and the working day started from 8 o'clock in the morning and went till midnight, 1 o'clock, till you got on that tour bus, closed the door behind you, and started to leave for the next city. And you'd be wound up, but I was able to compartmentalize it, turn it off, go to sleep, get 4, 6, 8 hours of sleep, wake up at the next hotel, get everybody moved in, and then the phone starts ringing because you've got the new local press and the radio stations that all want to talk to your artists. And a lot of it was prearranged ahead of time, but a lot of it wasn't. So, you had to, really, somehow I was able to just kind of go with the flow. And part of what people used to tell me is I'm a really laid back guy. And so I just kind of absorb it all, take it all in, and then react, but not overreact to it. So,
you strike me as someone who's really structured, though, or am I wrong?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, I'm not.
Well, so let's talk about relationships.
I'm a planner. I like to plan.
Yeah.
I don't do very many things spontaneously, but in that part of my life, I'm really structured.
I think it's easier to be. It's a little easier to be laid back when you know what's coming, and you've already. Maybe it's not your first rodeo, or you've got the bases covered, so you can be a little more relaxed.
Well, as a tour manager, I could tell you 30 to 60 days out exactly where it was going to be, what hotel I was staying in, what the daily schedule would most likely look like. So it was a very structured environment from that standpoint. But it was a very fly by the seat of your pants story when you had to deal with, you have 20 different people coming at you from 20 different directions wanting 20 different things, and you have to figure it out in a hurry.
That would be so fun. I bet you have a ton of fun. So handling, I bet in my mind, one of the key things would be handling the relationships and the personalities, which that really happens as an advisor. We have all different kinds of clients. What did you take away from tour management, relationship handling to handling clients?
Well, what you learn as a tour manager is everybody's human. They're just people. Yeah. Okay. They all, they get used to certain lifestyles, and if you can give them what they're used to and what they're looking for, then, and their life is not changed or impacted, that they're happy. Okay. With clients, it's a little bit different because when they come to me, usually there's something that they're unhappy about, or they have a problem that they're trying to fix or solve. Yeah. So the key is really listening, understanding what that problem is, and then helping them work towards solutions to fix it. So it's a little bit different trajectory, but equally challenging.
Do you ever have to pull out your like the wisdom of Solomon when you used to maybe the drummer is mad at the bassist and you have to settle them down, and then you have the husband and the spouse that are totally disagreeing about spending or.
So I've had both of those. I had one situation, I won't name the band, but there were 5 people in the band, and the 4 of them fired one.
Oof.
And so that went down, and then the one wanted to come back into the band, and it was a very high-profile band, so we had to sneak the one band member into town, bring him up through service elevators and kitchens to get him up to the hotel so they could negotiate to see whether he could find his way back or not. And so, there was a lot of secret and creativity going on in getting that done. It's a little bit different when you're an advisor, and
Sure.
I have had clients where the husband and the wife totally disagree and really are on different pages 100%. And when you're in that situation, I find you have to really listen to both, understand their concerns and what really they're afraid of, and to figure out,
Yeah, that's a good point.
what is driving that feeling and making them feel the way they do. And then, because we offer so many different types of products and strategies and solutions, if you listen to both sides, usually there's something you can come up with that may be a compromise as a product, or at least take some of the money and put it in one type of strategy that accommodates him and another strategy that accommodates her, and really negotiate a settlement.
Negotiate a settlement. Yeah, I just can't imagine the. Yeah, I mean, you must have been almost like a father figure to like an entire generation of bands there.
I don't know, father figure.
Wise
Maybe.
uncle. Wise uncle. Older brother.
In some cases, it was a disciplinarian. I had one act that they would hide everything from me because they saw me as like the teacher or the principal,
the fun police. Yeah.
And they didn't want me to know what was actually going on. But in most cases, I had a really good relationship. And I mean, you travel with somebody or a group of people for 3-6 months at a time, you get to know them pretty good.
I would imagine that you just by guessing, but I know that for us non-music industry people, we see the movies where they're like riding zebras through the hotel at like 4 a.m, and I'm sure there's probably craziness like that, and I'm sure there probably were some bands that were not boring, but not wild, or were they all just young and having fun?
Well, there were some that were certainly more business-like than others, and this was the 80s, so there was a lot of indulgence, and groups like Van Halen and Motley Crue really raised the bar in what was what you were trying to compete with. So there was a lot of extracurricular activity went on, but in my position, I was always the guy who had to have the bail money, who had to have the calm head in case the police showed up or there was a dispute, and somebody had to be there and be in a responsible position to represent what was going on. So, and sometimes you had to say no. Sometimes it would start to get out of hand, and you had to be the bad guy. So it was kind of finding that balance.
Which another parallel to our world, which is sometimes when someone comes to you with hey, I want to invest in this, you have to.
Oh, absolutely. Getting calls for, talking to people about some of the newer investment styles, crypto and things like that, or buying gold and silver. People are ready to dump everything they have and throw all their money into an alternative solution because they heard something on the radio. And I would say once every few weeks, I get a call where I have to talk one of my clients off the ledge and find out what's really driving the fear, and to remind them how we have things positioned now, and that more than likely things will work out. But you just have to be patient.
Yeah.
And I'll get calls later, thanking me for talking them off the ledge, and they appreciate it. So I'm not against any of those other investment types. Let's discuss it. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but let's not put all your money in one thing or another.
Exactly. We had when I was in private practice, I had a client that I don't have to worry about testimonials. This isn't one anyway, but would always come with penny stocks. Like we very, very, the whole, just like I think any advisor, you don't want to be a day trader or anything like that. You just sound advice. Let's get you to retirement. Let's make sure everything's smooth and as smooth and good as we can be. And he would always want to do some kind of wacky penny stock. And, we would have the conversations, the big picture, the things like that. He had a little bit of money off to the side. And usually those things wouldn't, they just wouldn't work out because he saw some article or something like that. And I'll be damned if one time, one ridiculous thing didn't pay off for him, and then we never heard the end of it.
That's all it takes.
That's all it took was, hey, what are we doing? Well, we're very sound. This is the plan. Hey, you guys remember when you told me that I shouldn't do, and remember that? So speaking of your ability to communicate, your ability to handle stressful situations, any techniques that you've used from the tour management days? We've had our 08. I'm just thinking through different big dips that we've had, and you've had to talk to clients. Just reminding them, or any special things that you do?
Well, when I came into this business, it was 2002.
Yep.
And we were at the end of the first, major downturn in the market. And part of why I got into this business, I led a wild lifestyle, but I was a pretty conservative investor. And I like the idea that you can't lose money, that you can invest some of your money in products that are protected or give you some downside protection. So that was a big attraction for me. And when I do get into that situation, and clients want more or think they're missing out, the fear of missing out, then I take them back to where we started and remind them why we did what we did, and say to them, we can change this moving forward, but this is why we did what we did, remember? Mm-hmm. And they're, usually say, yeah, I remember. At the time, it made sense. Hindsight's always 20/20. So what we, and always want to adjust and be flexible, just as in the music business, when plans change, you had to move sometimes a whole bunch of people all at once. Flight cancellations, hotel cancellations, fires in buildings, things like that. Well, life changes in the financial services world, and what may have been appropriate a year or two ago is no longer appropriate moving forward. So you have to be flexible to make those changes.
Yeah, and being able to communicate. I think what you said is brilliant, of reminding people of why you made that decision, taking people back, because there's, you also mentioned this earlier, when you started in the business, there wasn't the same access to information. And now I think, personally, I think we've gone to a almost like a do-it-yourself mentality. But when I think of that, I think of the fact that there's a crack in the basement bathroom ceiling that I've looked up. I know how to fix it. I can get that mud and the stuff, and I can plaster it and all that. Even though I've done the do-it-yourself, because I'm going to do it myself, I haven't done anything with it. And I think that for a lot of clients, or a lot of people who are planning on retirement, they're looking at all the information. It gets to be too much. They set it off the side and they don't do anything. And that's why they need you.
Very true. And, it's interesting because sometimes too much information can be dangerous too. And they always tell you, if you're sick and you're looking up all these diseases on the internet, all of a sudden the cold turns into cancer, and, you can create a lot of stress and really you need professionals to help you sift through the information, to organize it. And that's where, working with financial professional can really be helpful as well.
Yeah. How do you deal with that? With the, there, right now, there is no time in human history when more people have more access to information and half of it's incorrect. And do you just use the calm voice and walk them through rationally of when they're saying, but no, Mark, look at this?
Well, Part of it is I like to appeal to emotions, but when you need to go further, then you can always deal with statistics.
Hmm.
And statistics can be manipulated too. But if you have a good, honest relationship with my clients, which I feel I do, they trust me to give them the advice that they're paying me for, and in doing so, it gives me a chance to really calm them down. Because if you lose your ability to be calm
Hmm.
and you are panicking yourself, then that worries your client even more. They'll tend to mirror what you're doing, how you're feeling. So I find that if I act in a way that makes them feel more comfortable and confident, then they're more willing to listen, and you have a better chance of communicating and really getting to the root of the issue.
Market pulls back really big. Are you on the phone calming people down, or are you kind of riding it out?
Well, it's happened a couple of times, and I try and position my clients ahead of time that this is going to happen,
Yep.
and we have protections already built in to help offset some of those issues.
Hmm.
And most of them, fortunately, remember that. And so I get calls, but not a lot of calls. But the ones that I do, always take them and want to, talk to them and hear their concerns and work them through the process. And eventually, hopefully, come up with a positive solution to the problem.
Hmm.
And in most cases, we just stay the course because that makes the most sense. Sometimes you have to make some adjustments, though.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. I knew that's what you were going to say. Okay, so in your office, I imagine that I'm going to go on a hunch here, but you're probably really good with time management for yourself.
Yes.
That's what I figured. So, I mean, that would definitely be something ingrained from your music industry days.
Correct. So in the music industry days, we had what's called an itinerary. It was a folder, and everybody in the band and the wives all got copies of this, and you knew where you were going to be in any given day in any time period. It fluctuated a little bit, but you tried to be as accurate as possible. So that, time management, priority, and skill has really helped me, because when clients come in, we talk about what the meeting's going to look like, what we're going to discuss, the time frame involved, and what issues may come up or may not come up. So that way they're prepared for. We're not trying not to catch them off guard about anything.
Yeah. So, with that just popped in something in my head. Are you? You had mentioned that knowing ahead of time in the tour business, where you would be hotels, arenas, and such. Are you very systematic on your process when you're seeing clients? Are you like appointment one is going to be like, is it like clockwork for you, or do you have a lot of variation?
Yes.
Clockwork.
So it's repetitive and consistent in what we talk about, but where the variation comes in is to what their needs are and the strategies and solutions that we come up with and the direction that we take it in. But it's a structured process in getting them from prospect to client, and then afterwards, keeping that relationship ongoing.
So if I said, Mark, the Johnsons are going to be here at 1:00, it's their first appointment,
Great.
You'd know 90% of what's going to be going on, right?
Yeah, first appointment is all about them, getting to meet them, what their goals are, and finding out what their family structure is and their history, where they come from, where they want to go, and just it's pretty much all about them and getting to know them as good as well as I can.
Do you think your history and your background and experience with the music industry, with the networking part, do you think that gives you a big leg up on other advisors? I would think it would.
Well, the big leg up I think I get is because my background is so different than anybody else. And I talk about it a little bit when I'm in my seminars or workshops, just because I like to introduce myself and give people a little bit of my background so they know
who you are,
who I am, and why I do what I do. So the ones that are really into music, they come in and they want to talk music, and that's great. I'll talk to music all day. Um, but I think it helps them that some of them realize, hey, if these high profile artists with a lot of money trusted me with their business, then maybe I would feel more comfortable in trusting Mark with my business as well.
I like that. As we get close to landing this plane here, what would you, just going to throw this question to you right out, it's totally from the blue, but what would be maybe something that gives you from the music industry a complete unique perspective that you just don't see other advisors taking? That question was a mouthful too. It was a tough one.
That's a tough one. Initially, what I would say, a leg up that I have is because I've been just about everywhere in all 50 states, I'm very comfortable in striking up a conversation with somebody just by asking where they're from. And when they respond, more than likely, I've been there. And I have some kind of frame of reference that allows me to establish a connection and continue a conversation on a level that most people probably wouldn't be able to.
And music is such a universal thing. And you would be talking to the music that anyone sitting in the audience basically would have listened to or
right.
still does.
And it's the other part of it is that, I can relate to when I was in their area and who I was with in most cases. I still remember most of it. But that way I can say, and it's funny because sometimes I've mentioned or somebody's told me, oh, they're from New York. Well, New York's a big city. A lot of people are from there. And they ask me who I work with, and I'll say, and one guy said, oh, I was at that exact same show in 19 whatever it was, and I was in the building when you were there with your artist. So, it just is discussing music is universal.
Yeah.
Everybody loves music. It's something that's fun and everybody can relate to. And I'm fortunate that it's taken me around the world and given me an opportunity to establish a lot of rapport and connection with people that I meet on an everyday basis.
All right, so I've got like about 5 rapid fire questions for you that I was just thinking of while we're sitting here. So we're going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So first off, the Van Halen M&M story, the brown M&M story. Is that true or is that an urban legend?
Well, I never worked for Van Halen, but I knew people that did, and from what I know, it's a true story.
That is fantastic. So if you're listening to this show, or maybe you're a younger advisor, but back during the David Lee Roth Van Halen era, the story is that in their show rider, they had something that said in the dressing room, we want M&Ms, but no brown M&Ms. And then the reason was?
Well, it was kind of a joke. They just wanted to see how closely, as I've heard it,
yeah, they
just wanted to know. So what happens is when you do a contract with a band, there's what's called a rider. Oh. And on that rider, it's the personal request of the band. And so the band was just interested in finding out how closely they were reading it and how much they were willing to stick to it. Really detailed, and promoters with integrity would make the effort and accomplish take the brown M&Ms out. And if the promoter didn't do it, it was really a sign that they weren't really paying attention and they weren't happy. And so I think it upset the band.
The story I heard on the add-on to that, which might be one of those after the fact things. I always had heard that it was because the stage was so structurally complex that they would then go and check the stage. If they didn't read the M&M part, maybe they didn't get the stage right. Or do you think that's
I don't know. I've never heard that.
Oh, I'll tell you about it after. Okay, your favorite arena. You've seen them all. So favorite arena out there?
Man, that's a tough one. Because
if you were going to a show.
The arenas are so new. I've been out of it for over 20 years. But it would probably have to be like Madison Square Garden, just because of the history. And this is the old Madison Square Garden, just the staging and the history and the artists that have performed there. It wasn't the nicest place in the world, but and it was one of the harder places to work in. but just the history that it had.
Worst place?
Oh boy, I don't know if I have anything comes to mind.
Nothing comes like, oh, the Bismarck Civic Center, North Dakota.
No, nothing really comes to mind. I guess I've blocked that part out and compartmentalized
Put it away.
Yeah, forgotten about it.
So biggest, if you think, you don't have, not names, but like what would be maybe the biggest tour that you managed, like people wise, and like when you look back, like the biggest people shows, I guess the height of the band.
So it's interesting. I worked with, let me see, how should I phrase this story?
And I wasn't poking for a name. I just meant like the size of like how many people did you manage and how big of a.
So when I first started, I made the progression from tour manager to tour accountant. I got hired by this band, and when they hired me, I took the job because it was a good opportunity with a relatively unknown up-and-coming band. They were struggling to sell 3,000 tickets in 5,000-seat arenas. Well, that was in the fall, and then over the Christmas break, their record broke. And all of a sudden, in January, moving forward, they were selling 15 to 20,000 seat arenas out multiple nights. So, and that continued for a year while I was with them. So all of a sudden, I went from this obscure little tour manager to being the tour accountant on probably one of the biggest grossing tours of the year.
Wow.
And it was a new job for me, and I had to really learn on the fly. And it was a lot, very challenging, but a lot of fun. But it was tough. And there were probably the band was there were the artists, the band, probably 15 in the band entourage, and then probably another 40 on the crew. So it was about a 60-person show.
Does your experience, man, you just said something really interesting there. Does your experience having to have dealt with, I guess, entourage or hanger-oners or somebody's crew of friends, any lessons you've taken from that to dealing with the children of clients?
Yeah, because we had to deal with the children of artists.
Yeah.
And, it's there was a lot of intricacies and delicacies on how you treat them and the level of access as well as the level of respect. So it's not that much different than kids coming in with the parents. But I tend to, if I can, I like to try and talk to the parents ahead of time to kind of predetermine, in both cases, really what their parameters are, because they may want them to know certain things and they may not want them to know certain things. So what are the boundaries? And I usually like to have a pre-interview to figure out, what they're comfortable in talking about and maybe what they're not.
That's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up with, I've got one last question for you. When you think back on your music career, what would be probably maybe the biggest misconception that a non-music industry person would have about tours and touring?
It's not all fun and games. It is a lot of hard work. It's emotionally difficult. It's physically difficult. And the old days, it was all about the music. And that was, there was a lot of creativity. I think today, in my opinion, it's more of a business and it's a lot more sterile and there's a lot more rules and regulations. I don't think I would have done it today, what I had the passion to go into it today versus what was going on back then. But I'm looking back. I'm not looking forward. So that's just my opinion. And I may be totally wrong, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Well, and now you've got a completely separate, successful career on your second act.
I do, and very fortunate. I think, was fortunate. I kind of lived my life in reverse. I did my retirement travel early on and my play, and then I got serious and I went to work. And I really don't consider it work, but I love what I do now, and I love what it's provided for me and my family.
Yeah.
Both, as experiences, the relationships that I've built, and it's really fascinating for me. The most fascinating part of my job is somebody just walks in off the street and you're interviewing them to find out what their contributions have been to society and what they, how they built their worth and how, what they want to do. It's really amazing how creative people are and how focused they are and the way they've built their lives. I never get tired of it.
That's a very interesting perspective and a really cool one. And a perfect spot to end this episode. So, Mark, thank you for being on here today. We really appreciate it. And I think valuable content, just fascinating, the yin and the yang of both. For those of you out there, if you get a chance, feel free to like and subscribe to the show. Drop comments in. I would love to know what you're thinking. And if you have any content suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear them. Mark, again, thanks, man.
Thank you. It was fun.